here we go. All right. Today we are introducing to you a secret. What is that noise? A secret. One second. Let me get the web chat going. All right. Here we are. So, we're starting off on a sad, very sad note. Around, it's been just about a week since the last school shooting. I think this is the one in Texas where 10 people died. This stuff doesn't seem to be stopping, and right now, more children have died in school shootings than U.S. soldiers in combat this year.
That's terrible.
That's pretty bad.
That's terrible. Yeah. I don't know. So Garrett, you've been geeking out on the research this week, and as we've been talking about everything, I've just honestly been a little bit, obviously disheartened, but definitely in shock about how that's terrible to think that it's more dangerous to send your child to school than it is to go to war. What?
Yeah. The battle line is now in our schools with our children, and the battle we're fighting is nihilism and that torment that leads a child to get a gun and go start shooting. This is the real battle, and these are real demons. So, here's what we're doing here today. We're pre-launching what we feel is a solution to this problem that isn't enmeshed in gun control and things of that sort. I know a lot of people feel like that could definitely stop it, and it probably could. It seems like there's evidence for that. But at the same time, that's putting a lot of power in the hands of people who already have a lot of power, namely our politicians, and it's also deflecting our own power and responsibility. And when I say responsibility, I mean the ability to respond to this. So here's the thing. The weapon of choice happens to be certain kinds of guns, but the kid who shot up the school last week, he was using his dad's shotgun. It wasn't like he had an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle with a bump or something of that sort. He had pressure cookers, and he had a shotgun. And this is the thing. If our deeper problem is that there are children who want to do this, that's the real tragedy, is that there are, for every school shooter that actually happens, there's probably 1,000 kids dreaming of doing this, fantasizing about how they're going to get vengeance on their classmates for so deeply rejecting them. And so that brings us to what I feel is an important solution to this problem. Amid the Columbine shootings, there was commissioned by Congress a national longitudinal study to try to find what scientific, repeatable indicators are there or causes for children to become violent to others or to themselves. So self-harm and violence to others. And the mother of one of the Columbine shooters has very clearly said, after 10 years of really deeply exploring what happened, she says, it's fundamentally a suicide. It's just a violent, aggressive suicide. And that's the thing is, so anyway, either way, what this national longitudinal study found was all the factors that you would expect to lead to violence. Those things all came up negative, meaning they're not predictive. They're not scientifically predictive. Things like, do you come from a lower income family? Are you in a lower income school? You name it, all the things you could think of. But what they did find was, if a child reported feeling disconnected from their community, and or if the community reported feeling disconnected from the child, that was the salient, the biggest indicator, the biggest predictor, and scientifically, predictive. So that means that like feeling of connection is the thing that, when broken, leads to school shootings and suicides. And this is something that we all have influence and power over. If you are in a school system, you actually have the power to bring more connection to that community and to find those students who may be slipping away from the communal connection, and to bring them back into the fold, to reestablish connection. And that's that is what is inspiring our new campaign that we're about to launch, called Connection Challenge. And we're inviting you to come jam with us on it. Like, help us launch it, help us create it. Because how do you create greater connection with at-risk students? That's a big question. That's how do you get other students who are sort of in that egoic place of sort of high school, big egos, the hierarchy of social power, the mean girls, all of that. Like, how can we get those kids who would never ordinarily hang out with that loner kid? And that's how all these school shooters are described, as the loner, or a total loner, or the weird loner. Like, that's how they're always described. Well, there you go. That even that simple description indicates that kids are aware that they're disconnected. Loner, disconnected. Well, how do you bring everyone back into a deeper communal connection, especially those loners who are tormented and suffering in isolation? So there we have it. That's what we're doing. I'm gonna post in our chat a couple tools we have to kind of get this campaign off the ground. What I'm chatting right now is a Reddit link. I think that Reddit link is also, if you're on Facebook, that Reddit link should be in whatever, the description or whatever of this broadcast. And that Reddit link is just r/connection challenge on Reddit. The reason we're giving you a Reddit link is Reddit is really great at allowing people to have conversations where the best ideas rise to the top. And what we really want to do is brainstorm here. How can we help each other create viral expressions of connection that will get picked up in high schools across the country, and really enthusiastically and authentically used by high school kids? Because we all know high school kids are usually too cool for school. So if this thing smells like bullshit to them or contrived, they're probably not going to do it. So we need to find expressions, tools, things that bring connection to our communities that are palatable to the sort of the high school mentality.
Yeah, this is actually kind of interesting. Jonathan says, let's reward people who show love to the loners.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of what we want. We're wanting to sort of like source from y'all what you think would be maybe a good way to reward someone like that, or maybe a good, like, we do our weekly live stream, so maybe we're going to do the challenge of the week, and we want to know what you guys think would be a good connection challenge. We want to connect with you in doing this. Like, we want this to be sort of a group effort for us all to get involved in solving this problem, so that it's not something out there. Like, I love what you said, Garrett, that going about this gun control thing sort of puts the power in the hands of the politicians. It's like, that doesn't make us feel like we really can do much. And while that might feel more comfortable to just like kind of bitch and moan from our little corners of the world, I think it's, like you said, more responsible, like able to respond if we actually kind of get up off our asses and make something happen. So this is our effort to get up off our asses and make something happen, guys.
Yes. And to foster that connection. And so we're going to talk about some ideas today. This live stream will get a lot more juicy in a minute. We just want you to know that you are part of this. We want you to be part of this. I mean, the essence of the Connection Challenge is connection. So the more that even everyone listening to this can connect with each other, and we can connect. Shereen put together a Facebook group. There is a Facebook page called Connection Challenge. So just at Connection Challenge on Facebook. So we're just trying to create all these little places where we can gather and start working on the brainstorming basically and communing with one another and brainstorming, finding, discovering what are the ways that we can foster greater connection in our communities. What are some viral activities that we can birth through this, or discover and put some wind in the sails of. So like, things like free hugs and cash mobs and things like that, and flash mobs. But some of these things are actually beautiful expressions of connection, and maybe there's pieces of that we can resurrect and encourage more of. But also I think Shereen and I might want to dialogue a little bit here about, like, what is the problem that these kids are facing today in high school that maybe is different than it was 20, 30 years ago. Suicide rates are high now, and they're climbing. I just heard recently that teen girls' suicide rates are double what they were in 2007.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
I mean, if we're really going to get a dialogue going, if it's, dear Lord, that's terrible. First of all, I can't believe that's just not very far away. 2007, what are we in? It's like, that's like a decade ago. Yeah. So what the hell? Are you kidding me, Garrett? Holy crap. You keep like, I keep having these like, every time you tell me these statistics, I'm like, holy shit. So my ridiculous reaction aside, the only thing I can think of, and honestly, obviously, I don't have the answers, whatever. But like, the only thing I can think of is that social media, while it is something that can get us together in a lot of really positive ways, I think there is sometimes an issue with people feeling disconnected as a result, like looking at everyone else's life and thinking it's better than theirs, or maybe feeling like they don't measure up. Like, if you're able to, like, people already have issues with feeling like they're enough or feeling like they're good enough. That's just kind of a universal humanity problem. Like, couple that with, I don't have enough followers, or so and so has more followers, or no one's liking my posts. I mean, it was already so hard to be in school and be in grade school and be in high school, and like now we have this really weird measurement system where people measure their value. I mean, the only thing I can think of, the difference, if suicide rates in teenage girls have doubled in the last 10 years, is that it's possible that social media has an effect on that. Clearly, I don't know, but that's...
I would think so. I think social media is especially if you get mean girls involved in social media, now you have basically militarized mean girls. And that is just, it is probably the hardest, most inescapable form of emotional bullying made possible by Facebook and Instagram, and I think that's the thing, is like, okay, so we've got, I'd like to take a moment for Terry here, because before the comment goes away, hey, as a young person, I felt like I had trouble fitting in at my school. They had a class where people could go for their lunchtime and talk to one another. Usually kids with similar issues. I think things like that could help kids and not feel as lonely. Well, that's great. I like that.
Yeah, that is interesting.
See, that's a great idea. And so just to riff on ideas like that, it's like just finding the ways to break the ice, to connect, like having a lunch, especially if your lunchroom is awkward for you because you're socially awkward or not well received by your peers, to create a sort of alternative room that's safer and has a room for dialogue. I think that's a great idea.
That is a great idea. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. But yeah, so back to the reasons behind the rise in suicides. Yes, I think Facebook and social media has militarized bullying, and cyberbullying is like, just crazy intense. And then the other thing though is, like, ultimately, what is it doing? It's creating deep feelings of dissociation, disconnection, rejection in young people who, they don't know that there's more to life than high school. They don't know that this isolation and alienation they're feeling can end in other ways besides ending their lives. That once you get out of high school, once you get out of the bubble, you start making, you know, more genuine friends and things of that sort.
Yeah.
But you know, it's inescapable for these kids. So then, if you know, basically, this is something that's deep in our cells. You know, it's a deep cellular reaction to being rejected. So you know, on the fundamental cellular level, a cell that is disconnected from the other cells like it, and like a heart cell, if it finds itself in a liver, will kill itself. And the reason it kills itself, it's programmed to kill itself. And the reason it's programmed to kill itself is because if it doesn't, it becomes cancer. You know, and that's how cancer starts, is cells that don't kill themselves when they're in the wrong place, and they just keep growing. So so a cell is designed to kill itself when it finds itself disconnected from its peers. And then we have the National Longitudinal Study saying, you know, kids kill themselves when they're disconnected from their peers. And, you know, and then we have sort of our genetic memory sort of saying that, like, you know, back eons ago or ages ago, when there was just tribal humans, if you got disconnected from your tribe, that was banishment, that was death. So if your tribe rejected you, that was a death sentence. And I think we feel that in our bones. I think if your tribe rejects you, like, that feels like a death sentence. It might not be one literally at the moment, but actually with these kids, it's becoming one. Like, people commit suicide when they're rejected by their tribes. So we need to find a way to help these, you know, school communities, which are essentially big tribes, to not reject so harshly certain members of their tribe, unless you really mean to kill that kid, because that's might be what you're doing. So this is something that we need to find solutions to. Is how do you get very different types of students to engage in dialogue and commune with one another and really connect and see the goodness and beauty in each other, even if, like, one kid seems like a weirdo to you, or, you know, the other kid seems like this abrasive dumb jock. Like, you know, we need to find ways to break through those veneers and help people connect. And this isn't just school systems. I mean, we had a dude in Las Vegas shooting up all of Las Vegas, right? We had someone else shooting up a church last year. This is not just kids. This is a societal issue that we're all wrestling with. And anytime you have the chance to connect with someone, be it a stranger or an acquaintance that you just don't tend to, you know, give the time of day to, it's time to start, you know, rethinking that, because it's almost like become our civic duty to start developing these connections that could assuage suicide and violence.
That's interesting. The idea that it's our civic duty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here with the connection challenge. Like, we're kind of, like, you know, taking responsibility for this disconnection that's kind of in our society, that's really clearly affecting the youth. And I think, like, what's really sensitive about it is that, you know, young people don't really have coping mechanisms yet for a lot of pain, a lot of emotional pain. You know, like, I'm like a freaking 36-year-old chick. Like, I think I finally have figured out to some degree how to cope with rejection, or when things don't go my way, or when somebody doesn't like me. It's like, you know, I've had enough years to feel into who I am and feel okay when something doesn't go right. But it's like, when you're still in your developmental years, when you're still forming as a human, it's much more pivotal when people don't like you. It's much more pivotal to not be accepted. I mean, the like hierarchy and power structures in high school are very dramatic. Like, you know exactly who has power and who's in charge and who calls the shots versus who doesn't. And in a lot of ways, like, Garrett, you and I have kind of created our little worlds around, like, rebelling against society and, like, thinking for yourself, you know, and really, like, being about the truth. And that's really beautiful. And yet there are young people in high school and junior high or whatever who haven't found their tribe yet, you know, and they're kind of floundering in this system that doesn't really feel like it has a home for them. So I feel like it's an ultra sensitive time when people just really haven't figured out their path yet. They're not even quite ready to really cope with a lot of the difficulties that life gives them. And so, unfortunately, they take their lives too early, or they take rejection so harshly that they go, like the situation in Texas, like Garrett, you and I were talking about it, and you said one of the triggers was that this girl that he liked didn't like him back and apparently humiliated him in front of some friends in the classroom. I didn't know that until we talked about it. And that is terribly sad that, first of all, that happened to him, but then that he had zero coping mechanisms to deal with that pain, and then obviously went out and like attacked in that way. That was his coping mechanism, to attack. I feel like it's not only do we need to reject more softly, or reach out to those who might not be able to connect as easily, but I feel like also we need to equip our youth with coping mechanisms, or like whatever those peer programs are where they have someone to go talk to when they're really kind of troubled about something, instead of feeling like there's nowhere to go and they have to lash out or hurt themselves.
Well, and let's talk about that, because this just happened a week ago. So, the story that came out about the school shooter from Texas is that he had been sort of pining after this girl for a couple months, and she had been sort of she had been pushing him. I actually don't know what she'd been doing, but apparently he'd been pining after her for a couple months. And then it came to a head the week before the shooting. She apparently rejected him and deeply embarrassed him in front of a classroom of students. And so she probably hit that, point of like, dude, just leave me alone, or something of that sort. And he hadn't gotten the message up to that point. Well, he got the message there, but not only did he get the message, he was crushed with rejection and humiliation.
Yeah.
And so a week later, she was the first to get shot. And so he came back and killed her. And the problem here, beyond the violence, which is obviously the most terrible piece of it, the problem though is that she basically assassinated him the week before. Like, she put a stake through his heart. She basically committed like a social assassination by embarrassing him so deeply in front of his peers and making him feel rejected. And so it's like, there it is right there. We need a couple things. We need boys to be able to handle rejection better and have ways of expressing their feelings of rejection. I mean, all the school shooters are boys. You don't see girls doing this, right? But the girls commit suicide, and just like the mother of the Columbine shooter said, like, her son really, it was a suicide. It's just he wanted to take some people with him. And you hear these shooters actually saying that there's certain people they want to take with them. And the reason they want to take certain people with them is because those are the people that have caused them such deep hurt and pain in their minds. So you have the boys. We need to find ways to toughen up our boys so that they can handle social rejection better. My son was saying to me, when I'm asking him about this issue and bullying, he's saying, boys, like, when they talk about bullying, they're always just talking about physical bullying. Like, that's all I've ever heard about. I never hear about social bullying and things of that sort. I'm always hearing you're not allowed to, fight with other boys. You're not allowed to wrestle. You're not allowed to, push each other around. He says, frankly, I think that's an issue because it's made us all soft. And I was like, that's interesting, because there was an article that I was reading online by a psychologist who was saying boys learn to handle rejection through fighting. That there's some sort of connection with fighting and wrestling and roughhousing and getting beaten up and handling that. That's like toughens you up. And boys need to learn to handle rejection because boys tend to be the ones who are we're just being sort of gender biased here, but we'll say, okay, the masculine traits are the ones that are supposed to do the asking out and sort of do the pursuing. So when you're the one in charge, if you don't want to be alone, you need to ask that girl out, and put yourself out there and risk rejection. Well, if you haven't developed the stomach for rejection, that that one or three times you try, if you get harshly rejected, could be just too much for you to handle. So maybe something like Fight Club for boys might actually toughen them up enough where they can handle rejections in a much calmer way, and in a way where they don't feel like they want to take out physical or lethal violence on, So that's one side of it. But the other side of it is the psychologist who said boys learn rejection and how to handle it through physical altercations in the schoolyard and all that stuff. Girls don't tend to experience rejection like that. And so you can have a girl, she might be 15, 16 years old, never experienced deep cutting rejection, and how that can cut you to the core, and how that can make you feel like that like we said, you could feel it in your bones when you're rejected by your tribe. That's basically a death sentence. Rejection can really, really, really hurt. It can crush somebody. It can annihilate their sense of self. And if young girls are not sensitized to the fact that that guy might have been following you around for a while, but if you are harshly rejecting of him, and if you embarrass him, that could you're destroying them.
You're getting on the territory you're getting into is like touchy, because watching this are going to be like, what are we blaming the girls, whatever, Garrett machismo, mother effer, like, you know what I mean? Like, some people would be very triggered around this because, well, and actually it's interesting because Terry just said she did not assassinate him. He was harassing her for months, and she told him in no uncertain terms to stop, which puts a twist on it that's different. Like, obviously, if the guy just likes her and he's like coming on to her and not getting the hint, and then she's harsh with him, that's one thing. But it is another thing if he's harassing her and he's actually targeting her. I mean, to me, that means maybe there was a mental health issue and she already was his target. Whether or not she rejected or didn't reject him, clearly she was kind of like, so you tell me, did you read anything, Garrett?
Yes. So I'm not going to claim to know the exact circumstances of last week's shooting. So I'm speaking out of school here. I'm speaking in general terms. But what I spoke to a young man the other day who was describing a similar situation. And here's how he described it. A very socially awkward young man, was really into this girl, and he tried to ask her out, or whatever it is you do these days when you're professing your affection for someone you've got a crush on. And the girl was very good at kind of dancing away from it. Now, he's socially awkward, or socially... autistic's probably not the best word. What's another way to say it? But just like doesn't pick up social cues.
Up on social cues or nonverbal cues or both, whatever.
So so he's dealing with a lack of understanding of what social cues means and things of that sort. She is being probably very good at knowing social cues, being subtle and just sort of squirming out of a direct rejection. It's like, doesn't want to have to reject him, doesn't want him to even ask her whatever, so she just keeps sort of dancing out of the situation. And after sort of a few awkward moments, he kind of gives up. He'll try again another time. So this young man, who is very socially aware and also aware of sort of what's going on for both sides, knows she's not interested in him. She knows he's pursuing her. She's annoyed by it. And this young man knows, but if he doesn't go help this person who doesn't pick up on social cues, this boy who doesn't pick up on social cues, understand that she's not a possibility for him, he's going to keep pining after her. He's going to keep chasing her. So this young man went and talked to this other individual and sort of made it clear to him, hey, dude, this isn't going to happen for you, and here's why. And like he gave him a reason that was palatable to this boy, and the boy then was like, okay, could give up on that. He didn't feel deeply rejected. The reason given to him was something like, I don't know, whatever, she's not available or something like that. Whatever it was, it's like something that where he didn't feel rejected, he wasn't embarrassed, and he got the clear message: stop. Okay, this avenue isn't going to get you anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think that's the way to handle it. What it seems like, now I could be projecting here, but what it seems like probably happened in Texas is this girl didn't have a young man looking out for her and the boy chasing her, and she probably tried to squirm out of having to what do you call it, bluntly reject him, and she probably just kind of squeezed out of all these awkward situations. He would corner her in a hallway or something like that, and he just really wants her attention or ask her out, and she would find some excuse or reason to get away from him, and he wouldn't pick up on the social cue that she's running away from him. He just thought she really was busy. She really needs, she really did have to do that thing. She really did have to wash her hair that Friday night, like these kids who are not well socialized, these boys who are not well socialized, don't realize when they're being rejected in gentle ways. So then she thinks he's stalking her, which from her perspective he is, which from his perspective he's just pursuing her. And when she gets to the boiling point or gets fed up with it, now she just, in a fit of frustration, destroys him in front of an entire classroom of students, with both rejection and humiliation. And this is the problem. It's like, I don't think what she did was wrong, but I think what she did was insensitive. And I think if we had some training for people so they can see when someone isn't picking up social cues and have ways to manage rejecting people who are already very socially isolated in ways that doesn't destroy them, like I think those kinds of tools could be very helpful.
Well, and what's interesting? This is like so weird, Gary, because I feel like every time you and I do a live stream, like we end up getting in this conversation about the masculine and the feminine and their miscommunications. Like we've even at one point during some live stream discussed rape and like the gray area of rape that not oftentimes, sometimes it's terrible and it's just assault and it's horrible. All right. So there's that scenario. But then sometimes there's a scenario where I think we talked about the Russell Simmons story where the girl just like never blatantly said no. She just became afraid and then got into fight or flight and decided to comply sexually in order to not be raped. And so we talked about how sometimes this happens where there's a miscommunication, there's a misunderstanding, there's a lack of picking up on social cues or something. And therefore this gray area causes a catastrophe. And I don't remember who I was talking to, but I was on a walk with a friend and she said, men are afraid of being rejected and women are afraid of being killed because that's what happens. And I feel like
that's sad. Literally what happened.
Yes. I feel like that's so sad because in this situation, that's exactly what happened. He got rejected, which is his worst fear. And she actually got killed. It's like the worst case tragedy ever. Both of the feminine and masculine sort of like basic, amygdala brain, reptilian fears are being triggered, and then it actually ends in the worst case scenario. I mean, dear Lord, like how can we avoid that? If there's one thing I want this connection challenge to do is like, God, if there's a way we could be more connected, if there's a way we could actually hear each other better to just come to a higher consciousness around the way we relate instead of being in that like adrenaline response, fight or flight mode, we would literally save lives. You know what I mean? We would literally save people's lives.
Yeah. And this situation last week wasn't isolated. If you look at the Florida shooting that happened, the shooter was rejected by his girlfriend and then the school system. So she started up, I guess, broke up with him and started up with another guy. He wasn't taking it well. Something happened and he got expelled. And then he came back with an AR-15. Like, so this rejection thing, I think you really hit the nail on the head, Shereen. or your friend did. It's like rejection, um, especially to, I don't know how to say it, like boys around 18 years old are highly volatile. This is why they're conscripted for war, because like you can put a gun in these kids' hands and they think they're invincible and they don't understand the gravity of death, and they are highly aggressive, they're full of testosterone, and they're you know they're, I think just in general, a young man that amped up on testosterone, who doesn't have a lot of life experience and feels invincible at least on a physical level, I think you've already got you've got a very dangerous creature there if they're armed or if they're motivated. So girls feeling like, if you reject a guy too hard, you could be killed.
Yeah.
You're probably right. Like this has probably been, and this is probably something women feel deep in their bones, that has probably been an ancient phenomenon, is a woman rejecting a man, a prehistoric woman rejecting a man could get killed. And maybe this just happened throughout the ages, and so maybe just on a steep genetic level feel, you got to watch out here, which is true. And then at the same time, you have these guys who aren't socialized enough to know how to handle rejection in a non-primal, non-violent way. And I think, there's probably things we need to do for boys to create a kind of safety net for them, where if they're rejected by the girl, she's not like his one chance to feel connection in his life,
Yeah.
I think we also have to find ways for girls to, if you look at, Florida shooter, that was about, it seems like that there's a lot of stuff around rejection and a girl. The Texas shooter, same thing. Columbine shooter, I did some reading up on him. He was saying that he doesn't have any girl will like him, no girl will like him, and he just wants to be accepted by a girl. And he had a list of dozens of people that he said he loved but would never love him back. Like he was just going like one after another. I assume they were girls, but they could have been just people who he loved, and he said in his journal would never love him back. So there is this, I think, this thing, where you have the Columbine shooter saying he just wants to be accepted by a girl, and these two other shooters, seems like that was part of their motivation too. How do we start creating? I from the looks of these guys, and I might be speaking out of school here, but from the looks of these guys, they seem like, even if they were friend zoned, but at least accepted, like it seems like that might have been enough for them. They're not exactly like, stud muffin material here. They're look like they're just lonely guys. So maybe there is some way for us to develop a sensitivity training for people in high schools. It's like, look at, if someone's pursuing you and you're not interested in them romantically, maybe there's like friend zone kind of kindness that you can extend to them that doesn't I don't know, that doesn't give them the wrong idea, but also kind of keeps them. Maybe that's what friend zone is all about. Maybe friend zone evolved as like a way for women to feel safe while still not engaging. What do you think, Shereen?
I don't know, Garrett. This is a big, weird problem because it's just so touchy. Like, I really think there's no way to go about it outside of addressing both parties. Like, it's almost like this is like a communication training, an emotional intelligence training, a connection training to help people dispel misunderstanding. Because, like, the truth is, like, if a guy knew this person may not like me, because we can like rewind. It's like, it's not like someone feels rejected by a girl and then goes and shoots up a school. Like there's probably tons of mini rejections that happen up until the point of the sort of volcanic explosion that happens. I mean, we could literally do a training for parents on like how to make your children feel accepted by you first. Because like if someone has like a solid foundation, I highly doubt they're gonna go shoot up a school. You know what I mean? Like it's not like the girl's fault for rejecting them in the wrong way. So I hesitate to like want to do like the rejection sensitivity training. Like I like that, but only as like one piece. You know what I mean? Like it has to be one piece of like a much larger pie, because I just feel like that's really not, that's like a micro that we like. I feel like there's more of a macro way of looking at it, where like starts with the parents, and it definitely has to do with like the community and the school. And I think that the boys should probably have trainings around dealing with difficult feelings, or even teachings, or like hearing stories of like men who were rejected time and time and time again but still found their love, or like Michael Jordan, who like was told he was sucked at basketball but then became freaking Michael Jordan. Like that, there was some understanding like this moment isn't the end all be all. I think that would really help. And then we could throw in the sensitivity training for the girls. I'm down for that too, but I feel like if we keep going to that, I feel like we're like missing like the whole picture, you know?
Yeah, well, like, just to clarify, like that's why I spent like when I introduced the topic, that's why I spent 80% of the time talking about how boys need to be given some sort of training on their own, like whether it's physical roughhousing and wrestling and things like that, or whether it's some sort of boys club. The Boy Scouts doesn't really exist anymore. Sports, I think, used to be much more like everybody does it. It seems like there's a lot of kids now who just don't get into sports and don't get into any other clubs either.
Well, maybe that's part of the problem.
I think
maybe
it is.
Social media and video games has kept kids out of community.
Yeah, well, I think especially sports. Like I can't imagine an athlete who's been part of like school sports all through their career getting triggered this way.
Yeah.
Like I could see them being deeply hurt and crushed by a rejection or something of that sort, but I can't see them like going to this level with it. Though you hear about it all the time of like all these teen suicides, a lot of times there's like some sort of rejection that happened, that, and a lot of times that rejection is quiet. Nobody's going to admit that's what happened, a few days before the suicide or the day before the suicide. But I think there is, yes, there's definitely a lot that needs to be done just for the boys. And I think if we're trying to protect our daughters, we can't count on every dysfunctional household in the community like raising their sons in a way that protects them from the devastating effects of raw rejection. It's like, so if you want to protect your daughter, are you going to trust that the dysfunctional household on the other side of town that happens to have a gun in the closet, and the weird boy is training that boy to handle your daughter's like cutting rejection?
Yeah,
I wouldn't trust it. I'm going to teach my daughter, say, hey, look at, if a boy is showing affection towards you and he's weird or creepy or or just somebody you're not into, like, here are some ways to let him down easy, or here are some ways to befriend him, but have very strong boundaries. I don't know. I'm just starting this thought process. I've never had to encounter it again.
Here's an idea. Like, I almost think like, just based on how this discussion has gone and just kind of like all the thoughts that are coming out through this live, I feel like maybe it literally should just be like part of school curriculum to have an emotional intelligence class. And then you could address it all, like you could even address to a kid, there's just so much information. Like there's a book called, it's something about like children who were raised by emotionally immature parents, and it really helps you figure out like how that affected you and and it's like, we're old and we're reading it now because we're like unraveling all this old shit, but it's like, how freaking awesome would it be for there to be a class where there's some sort of like teaching around how we can and should treat people and what's ideal in terms of like relationship and communication, and like that would be amazing. If there was, I almost feel like America, this is what we need to do, because
Yeah.
our kids are killing each other or themselves. There's something wrong. You know what I mean? Like they're not learning the life skills that they need to cope with life. Sure, they're learning math and science and history, certainly, and they're figuring out how to go to college or become an entrepreneur, but they're not learning how to connect. They're not learning how to be in relationship. They're not learning how to read social cues and deal with them, deal with rejection. They're not learning coping mechanisms and skills for life. It's not okay. Like we're not equipping our people well.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who started a class called Rivers and Revolutions here in Concord, and that's exactly what it seems like he's doing. He's has the kids do a lot of sensitivity training oriented stuff, has the kids sit around in circles and share deep and difficult experiences that they've had that they normally wouldn't share. He brings together students that are of very different walks of life, kind of forces them together. Think of it like, my son described his situation where he had to go pick invasive species from the woods. So basically weeding, go weeding in the woods. Pick weeds in the woods. It seems like just like this insurmountable task, and him and 5 boys were put together to do it. And what my son is like, so like to move off the girls a bit more again, and to focus on what we can do for boys. You take 5 boys, you put them together, you force them to work, you force them to have a singular goal or a collective goal, and you make them do that for 3 hours in a 3-hour span once a week for 3 weeks. Those boys are going to kind of break down Breakfast Club style and get to know each other, and these are boys that probably never talk with each other otherwise because they're just so different. But then, because they've got this collective goal and they're stuck with each other for a while, a brotherhood emerges and connection emerges, and it's a beautiful thing that can happen. And something that we should probably do is just forced labor for the boys.
Yeah.
Put them in groups. Not don't put all the jocks who know each other together. Put one jock and one intellectual and one guy from the drama club and one think Breakfast Club, and put the most strange connections together, and then force them to spend a sustained amount of time with each other. My son was saying 3 hours for 3 hours, all in one span, for 3 weeks. So it's like you do a 3-hour thing once a week for 3 weeks. And he said that is probably the bare minimum required to break down very sort of calcified roles and whatever with boys. And he also said, my son also said, and no girl should be there, because as soon as there's a girl in the group, now there's sort of peacocking, or there's this dynamic of who's impressing the girl, and that kind of thing, and that creates a competition between the boys. And the whole point of this was for them not to be competing with each other, but to be working together on the goal of clearing a forest of all the weeds, which is like basically impossible, but at least at least there's something for them to be sort of doing as real.
Exactly. So they can connect and get past the BS. I mean, my goodness, like we all need that. I mean, at the age of like 25, went to my first personal development seminar, and it was so freaking awkward. Like they had you sitting across from someone, staring into each other's eyes, to like kind of get past that knee jerk, like I'm going to break eye contact because it's awkward, like just to really get us to connect. And I remember thinking how freaking awkward this is. But man, by the end of the seminar, you're like, I love you so much. Like you're totally connecting in this different place. Like you walk into the room and everyone's just someone you're judging or you feel weird around because it's uncomfortable. And by the end of the weekend, you're like all BFFs. I just feel like we need to connect with your Rivers and Revolutions friend and maybe discuss like how to get this type of class into classrooms across the nation, because everybody needs it. I mean, the coaching industry is like $1 billion industry because people need it, but they're only getting it as adults, Like, it's like, I actually used to be contracted for a company, not a company, but it was a nonprofit organization called Pathways in Education. And I would do similar stuff to what your Rivers and Revolution friend is doing in schools. But we would take at-risk youth away, and we would go to like Big Bear in the mountains from like Friday to Sunday. And I'd be their kind of like weekend speaker person. And we would do these activities that really got them out of judgment and into acceptance, or out of separation and into connection. It was really focused on life skills. And it was amazing. I mean, these kids need it so bad, and they're all experiencing such profound pain in their homes. It's so sad. I remember one girl told me that she was like 15 years old, and she said basically was orphaned. She told me like, yeah, she lived in a bad area, and when she was really young, I think her dad got shot, and then like when she was like 14, her mom got shot. So it was like, oh yeah, my aunt took me in, and it's just, that was her life, like these kids are dealing with like terrible pain. Like, we can't just be like, yeah, math and science, go to school. It's like, come on, like, this is real stuff. Like, we need to be supporting people emotionally in being in life, not just doing life, but actually like being in the experience of it,
Yeah. I heard this just the other day, is that, school, this was saying that a lot of people who come to therapy, it's not that there's anything actually psychologically wrong with them. It's that they just don't know how to live. Like, nobody taught them how to live an organized, productive life, free of all these dysfunctional nightmares. And it's not because there's something like, psychotically or whatever, it's not something psychologically wrong with them, but it's more just like they just haven't learned how to deal with our society and life in general, and there's no class for that. And this is I think what we need. I think we need a proactive curriculum in the school where people can be taught how to pick up social cues. This would be good for these boys who don't it's because what'll happen is they don't pick up the social cues for so long that then they have to get like really bluntly rejected, which is harsh, which then creates like this sort of bad dynamic. And I would say like probably 9,999 times out of 10,000, that's not really an issue, but that one other time it's like it's a suicide or it's a school shooting or something terrible. And it's just because it all started with not being able to pick up social cues, which means people didn't really want to hang out with this kid because he wasn't picking up social cues. Like, so let's do a social cue class.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's like,
I can't read. One of these comments is great. I can't read who it is because it's already kind of scrolled up, but they're saying that it's easier to try to prevent problems than correct them. So true. And they're saying it also costs less, both in the aspect of money, but most of all, the aspect of human suffering. Preventing a fire is something we do very little in society because we're so busy putting out the major flames. And that's where all the resources go. So like when they said that, I'm like, it kind of reminds me of like the pharmaceutical industry. It's like we're so busy medicating problems and making a killing off of it, like making stuff. That was a terrible pun. I wish I could take those words back. But making a lot of money on it, but really what we need to be doing is preventing these health issues by virtue of exercise and eating better and having a more alkaline diet and eating more vegetables. But instead, we eat cheeseburgers and then we take medication for type 2 diabetes. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? This is definitely not the right way to do this.
I'm going to answer Will's question about Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club is a movie. Google it. Netflix it. It's a movie.
It's a good movie. Check it out.
It's a good movie from the 80s with some great music. Molly Ringwald.
Molly Ringwald, yeah.
Woohoo!
Exactly.
So, and it's a great movie about like what happens when you force like, all 5 corners of the student body, the most extreme examples, the jock, the rebel, the sort of artsy misfit girl, the prom queen, and like force them all to be in a room. Like, first of all, these people would not talk with each other because they have all socially rejected each other on one level or another before they get into that room, right? Like, so social rejection, can happen in a way that's just much more like in Breakfast Club world. It's not like someone's pushed. It's not like any one of. I guess some of them were pretty isolated, but it's like they've all socially rejected each other for various reasons, and then they get stuck in a room all day long, and they have a common enemy, the principal, and they commune, they connect. Something beautiful happens. They become really good friends. It's like such a beautiful movie. I'm gonna watch it. I'll probably watch it tonight or tomorrow. You know, because it's like, and that's that's the thing that we want to create more of. Is like, how do you take these people who are in the sort of rejecting each other in one way or another in these school systems? How do we make a much more connected school community where we have like breakfast clubs? I mean, maybe that's it. Or go for a walk. Like I just saw on Reddit today, and it's really true. Steve Jobs used to do this for meetings. It's like if you walk with someone, it's like the level of connection you develop by being sort of looking in the same direction, going somewhere together, not having that confrontational stance of like looking across each other, like you were describing that seminar. If you're looking somebody right in the eyes, that can be very uncomfortable. Especially if it's someone you don't know very well. And so this person was saying, like, to get to a real level of comfort with someone, go for a long walk with them, and the beautiful connections come out of it. And then there was all of these comments on that post on Reddit of people like, yeah, that was how I met my husband. That's how I met my wife. It's like, it's like that was the first date that we had or whatever, or like he walked me home from school and I had another boyfriend at the time. But it's like there was all this stuff, and then somebody was saying. That still on the walking subject, that the leading Nazi interrogator was able to get more information out of people by going for walks with them than by torturing them. So he would just yeah. So it's like, whether you're trying to build connection or interrogate spies for the Nazis, going for a walk seems to work. So, and that's another great thing that Rivers and Revolutions just does, is they go for walks through the woods or the rivers, or they go walking everywhere. And it's like, that's this is it. Like, this builds connection. This is what we need. So
this is also a good idea. Anthony says, give or have them create projects where they create something useful together. And that's so genius. That's exactly what that personal development seminar did with us. They actually had us do community service projects. And it's so cool. We did one where we painted an elementary school with like positive affirmations and beautiful art of like rainbows and flowers. And it was like such a cool project. And then out of that, everyone loved it so much that they created a nonprofit organization called Operation Project Hope. And so this group of like seminar junkies who did this original project together, now all they do is like paint up these elementary schools with all this positive affirmation stuff. And there's statistics on how it helps the students feel more happy and alive and creative and at home and loved in their environment. So I think that's a genius idea. I just think, we just got to bring this like super woo-woo vibe to the schools. Everything's gonna be okay. Hopefully, cross your fingers. At least better.
Right, and I think this is the thing, is like there's school systems stuff, which I think is very difficult, because you have to kind of come from the top to the bottom. Like, you have to get like whoever's in charge of school systems, either in your state, or at least you have to get the superintendent of your school system to allow something of the principal. Maybe it can be as low as the principal. Well, here's the thing: if you're going to do a program, it's going to have to like come in from above, right? But if you can find ways like that wiggle room that we all can sort of socially just bring something to your school communities and start doing it. I had this thing called Freedom Class that I did in a school system nearby me. I just divested my company. I was in this sort of semi-retirement phase of my life, and I was like, what do I want to do? And I was like, I want to go teach the kind of class that I would want to have. So I called it Freedom Class. And there's a school nearby that like let just randoms like me come in and teach their kids. I just thought it was amazing. I was like, all right. So I've got a bunch of middle school kids, and we talked about how to start a food fight, and like, all kinds of stuff that got me sent to the principal's office. So, but what this basically was like, my version my little attempt at what my friend ended up building into like something much greater, which is this Rivers and Revolutions project, where
Yeah.
he takes an entire set of kids and not just one class. He gets the whole semester. Like he gets
Oh wow.
all the classes all day long for these kids
Great.
all semester long. It's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
it's like, but I think it's very hard to get one of those programs instated in your school system. So it's like, what can we,
Hmm.
as a community of wayseers and
Hmm.
free thinkers and really intuitive, smart, brilliant, mystical people, like what can we come up with that can just like work like there's this game HQ, right? So this is the thing. Like, okay, this game HQ, all it is just trivia, and a million people like come and like compete for trivia on their phones, and it happens like So you download the app, and every day at 3 or 9 o'clock, a bunch of people just are playing trivia. Well, okay, that's not so cool. But what is cool is if you do that with a group. So like I have this bar community, and I'll be like, someone showed me this HQ thing, and I was like, this is cool. And so I was like, well, if we all get our phones going, we have like 6 or 7 chances here at every question. So next thing we know, we have like, it'll be HQ time, and there'll be this gathering of like everybody at the bar to come play HQ, which is very communal. Like this is, I don't know, profound like feeling of connection that happens, just everybody trying to win this little HQ game together.
Hmm.
And that's something you can do right now. Like, go to school next time you go to school, if there's any students watching, or in your office or whatever, when HQ comes on, put your phone down, get everyone else to have downloaded the app and put their phone down and play together, and
Hmm.
grab that loner kid who's might be really good at trivia, and be like, he's gonna know all like the Star Trek references, which I think there was one
Hmm.
last night. It's like, what language do they speak in Star Trek? Klingon, right? Like, who would know that if unless you're spend time in that universe? So it's like, that's the thing, is like, we maybe something like HQ, something as simple as that, play for
Yeah.
10 minutes with each other, and you're all on the same team, and I don't
Yeah.
know, it's communal,
I love it.
it's
It's
like,
yeah, it's like team building.
yeah,
Exactly. Trust
yeah.
falls, Garrett. Virtual trust falls.
Yes, virtual trust falls. How do you
Right?
tell
Okay,
me
so
more about that? What were you thinking with
I
virtual
mean, I
trust
don't know,
falls?
like, team building, just what you were saying with the HQ game made me think of team building. And I'm like, yeah, that's basically what it is. It's like, people learning to work together to accomplish something, achieve something, get to some common end. It requires them to connect and get past BS and work together and communicate. And they always learn something about themselves. It's just fantastic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to comment on Terry's thing about like kids having to look good. I mean, obviously, like, high school is militarized egos. It's like, this is like kids have fully developed egos, in the sense that they're most vicious, most competitive at that age, most unadulterated ego, maniacal, hierarchical, social hierarchies and whatnot. And so things like how you dress and how you look and all that stuff play such a salient role in how people are treated. But we need to get, like, well, we can't like say, okay, well, kids need to be helped to dress better, even though maybe that would help. But I'm thinking it's like, we need to get these, somehow find a way to get beyond the ego stuff in these high schools, can help kids like see that deeper connection. And I really wonder, it's like, if you've got just a very egoic high school kid, can you
Mm.
break through that veneer and get them to settle down into something much more authentic
Oh
and
yeah.
soulful? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Everybody's breakable, baby. Definitely. Are you
Yeah.
kidding? My
Yeah.
goodness. Like I walked into my first like personal junkie development seminar like with my arms crossed. I literally was like, I need a freaking refund. Like I'm way too cool for this school. I do not need to be here. This is for people who need help. And then they said, you'll get a refund if you go through the whole thing and you just still decide you didn't get anything out of it. I was like, fine. And it just like broke me open. Like I literally was like, oh my God, this seminar just changed my life. I'm like so happy I stayed. Thank God for that really annoying refund policy. Like I just think like sometimes people don't know what they need, they don't know that they're disconnected. Like from themselves and from other people. Like they don't know until they know, and then shit, then the whole world opens up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to wrap up in a few minutes here.
Yeah, we should.
So I'm wondering, like, Garrett, do we want to leave them with a challenge for the week? What's our sort of like, do we want them to find us on Facebook and tell us their ideas around, what
so a few things. Yeah, so we've got the Facebook page and the Facebook group, Connection Challenge. It's an @ thing. So we're Facebook/Connection Challenge, Facebook.com/Connection Challenge, Reddit.com/r/Connection Challenge. Those are sort of two ways to connect. But really, what we're and then your homework, if you so choose, is like start finding ways to connect more deeply with acquaintances that you normally wouldn't give the time of day to, or connect with strangers and create that sort of true connection. Like that's your homework, is start doing that, and then take note of what works. Also, when you're joining us in these groups on Facebook or Reddit, we're brainstorming stuff. If you have ideas that might work, like share your ideas and then let's try them. And that's kind of what I think we're going to have, is sort of this evolutionary cycle of coming up with ideas, sharing it with each other, trying them, reporting back how it works, and just sort of snowballing that. That's what we're doing. And then hopefully in the next week or so, we'll also be launching this campaign in earnest, where there's going to be a lot more activity. Woo! But yeah. So what else? Anything else? I think we're done.
No, I think that was solid. Thank you guys for being part of this.
Yeah.
And helping us get this party started.
Yep.
Thank you, Garrett, for researching the heck out of a very dark subject so that we can bring some light into it.
All right. God bless you all. I hope may you have many grand and beautiful connections in the coming days, and report anything it's like this. It works like crazy for creating connection on the fly, or doing something that might work in schools. Please share it with us on the Connection Challenge Facebook wall, or in the comments here, wherever you can share it with. Like, if you can't get over there, do it here, but like, we want those ideas. We want to start working with those ideas. And if you'd like to be part of sort of running this Connection Challenge campaign that we're doing, we want your help. We're doing another video, my style kind of viral video. I've already got like a bunch of the audio and pieces for it, but if you want to help find good footage, or help with editing, or anything of that sort, or you happen to have something you want to contribute that way, totally want you on board. If you want to help us curate great videos or documentations of Instagram or whatever, of people creating connection, that we want your help. This is a tribal thing that hopefully will just continue to grow from the very tiny place we are right now.
Woohoo!
So,
all right. We'll see
God
you
bless
next time.
Bye.